Are you ready to unleash your full potential and become unstoppable in your success and leadership?
Welcome to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast, where we provide powerful insights and strategies for coaches, corporate leaders, and entrepreneurs. I'm Lianne Carter.
And I'm Carol Register, and we're certified master neurocoaches who are passionate about helping you overcome your limiting beliefs and optimize your performance.
Each week, we'll be sharing actionable tips and strategies using neuroscience, from interviews with industry experts to solo episodes, to help you lead a life of power, purpose, and possibility on your own terms.
Join our community of like-minded individuals. Hit subscribe now, and let's be unleashed and unstoppable together.
Hey leader, welcome back. Oh my goodness, I am so excited. Not only the fact that when this is live, we are just, we're in the holiday season, and I have a great, amazing friend of mine here today, Cathy Brooks, who is going to dive in all about communication. And if those of you that are watching the video, you can see that she's even being expressive with her communication, with her body language, which we know body language is huge when it comes to communication. But before we dive in, I just wanted to introduce a little bit of who Cathy is, because I think that she has such a very unique and beautiful background in her role and how she shows up in leadership and how she shows up as a communication coach. And just having known Cathy for the last couple of years, like, her energy is just magnetic. And so I'm so grateful that she's here today. And I find it so timely to really dive into communication, especially as we're heading into, holiday season. We're spending more time with loved ones, and communication can get a little heated. So who is Cathy before they pass the mic over? Well, she is a leadership and communication coach whose life is dedicated to the art of communication. She's a graduate from Northwestern's Middle School of Journalism. Cathy spent 22 years in Silicon Valley in public relations, event curation, and business development. Then in 2012, she turned a lifelong passion for canine behavioral study to turning that into a career and opened up the Hydrant Club in Las Vegas, Nevada. And if those of you may have watched the Knights play in their playoffs a couple years ago, Cathy actually has a GIF of her fully covered head to toe at that hockey game. So you know what? I think we'll drop that link below, Cathy, so our audience can take a look at that. After Cathy opened up her Hydrant Club, she then applied this expertise in communication to facilitate connection between dogs and their humans. And Cathy realized in that moment that she could actually transform the way people communicated with each other using the metaphor of dog-human relationships. So after spending time in leadership training, she then launched the Unleashed Leadership LLC, which is so perfect because we are the Unleashed Unstoppable podcast. And this is a transformational leadership and communication coaching business, leading people to financial and personal success through effective and powerful communication, which is why we're so grateful to have you here with us today, Cathy. So Cathy also developed programming that is uniquely deconstructs and rebuilds clients' understanding of communication on 3 pillars: individual and personal communication, group dynamics and facilitation, and conflict resolution. And what makes Cathy's work stand apart are the platforms she uses. So listen in carefully, listener. She takes dogs, classical music, and ice hockey and draws from the metaphors from these 3 areas and these perspectives to generate consistent and long-lasting results for her clients. So it's just amazing. And of course, when she's not busy coaching communication, spending time with her dogs, she loves to watch hockey, especially her Vegas Golden Knights. And she also has her own podcast. If you guys want to take a look and take a listen, it is Talk Unleashed. And she really stands for her vision, which is about making the world better by enabling everyone with the skills of effective and authentic communication. Welcome, Cathy.
Hey, Alex. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm really curious, especially when you look at hockey, dogs, classical music.
How on earth do those things work?
Yeah, we're talking about communication. And speaking especially, to the listener who is a leader, right? And where we get to, basically, like, for the listeners listening in who really wants to, one, I think, have confidence in their communication, have confidence in landing the communication and create a more inclusive and clear communication and creating like love and joy in the relationships. Where would the listener start to embody some of the pillars that you work with your clients on to create that?
Big question. Great question and big question, because it is, of course, the first thing that everybody wants to know, which is, where the hell do I start with this? And, when you think about as I listen to you describing the background, I think to myself, yeah, no wonder people always laugh, because it seems like it has absolutely nothing to do with each other. But the truth is, as we know, Alex, from leadership, that as I do one thing is how I do everything, that the metaphors, it's really about what's the metaphor that's going to really land with someone. I sometimes delve into gardening metaphors or architectural metaphors, cooking metaphors. It's really about what is the lens that's going to really connect with how someone sees the world. So a little bit, when I back up a little bit, so the Hydrant Club was a particularly unique approach to the canine behavioral study, dog education business. Put simply, dog training, right? So people have a dog has behaviors. How do I make the behaviors, go away? And what I was seeing is that people were coming to the door and saying, so, let's say it's a 5-year-old dog and they put it through puppy training. And so now the dog has started tearing up the irrigation in the yard. And they'll say, and I'll inquire, what was the path that you had with your dog? Your dog knows how to sit and walk on a leash, and you did some training. Yeah. We did this training. And they'll pause. And in 100% of the cases, people say some variation of the following. I know it's my fault. I'm not consistent. I know that it's me. I know that I'm the one that has to learn. And they would say it, with such certainty. And so finally, I just paused one day and I said, so you've just said to me with complete certainty that you know where the problem lies. You said you've spoken to 4 other trainers before you ended up on my doorstep. What do you think I'm going to say that's different than what they said? What is it? Where is it not connecting? Because if you know that it's your behavior that needs to change in order to get a different result, and you've talked to other people, did they not give you something actionable? Did they not? Because I don't want you to spend your money with me and waste your money and hear the same thing and get the same result. If you're walking out my door, you're walking out of my door with a dog that's behaving the way you want it to behave. Period. And what I found was really simple, that people were looking for mechanical, tactical, just things to do. That would change their dog's behavior, that would affect a change with their dog. And that's not how relationships work. Relationships between any sentient beings are based on the first 2 words of that word, be. It's the beingness of the being with the other beings that determines the relationship. Have you ever had a time where you walk into a room and there's someone there and they rub you the wrong way and they haven't even opened their mouth? It's something energetic. It's something about how they are being in that space that is triggering a response with you in something else. And so I started working with my dog training clients. And this is before I really started exploring leadership even. So I opened the Hydrant Club in 2012. And then, it was a couple of years in where I saw these conversations. So I was doing some work and I was kind of playing around the edges of it. And it was right when the pandemic hit and I needed to pivot the business and grow some other avenues that I started to really pursue leadership coaching for myself, actually, like how can I lead my team, be a better leader for my team? And in that process, found that I was a really good coach. And I was like, okay, so I'm a really good coach. I'm getting this leadership thing. Where's my sweet spot? And when I got asked, what's your vision for the world? I had this immediate feeling in my chest of the weight that is, and this is, 3-4 years ago, this is before things have gotten as bad as they've gotten in the last, even 8 months. This sense of an unbearable weight, just this unbearable weight that we all carry, and we carry it in different ways, and it manifests in our lives in different ways. And some people hide it better than others, and some people make do better than others. But for the most part, the world is a shit show right now, right? Like the world has gone sideways. And rather than leaning into the discomfort and say, I'm uncomfortable, how can we meet here to resolve it? Everybody's doubling down on their position of how wrong the other people are who are causing the problem. And I believe that it is possible for us to have a world where anyone can talk to anyone else about anything at any time, even when, and especially when the topic at hand is something that has disagreement. Not saying there's not going to be conflict, not saying there's not going to be friction, not saying it's going to be a big global kumbaya and everybody's going to agree to everything. Not saying that at all. Saying that my view being different than yours, or my desires or wishes or whatever being different than yours, do not in any way, shape, or form mean that I am in opposition to you, unless I've taken a position that the only way is my way. If I'm standing in my belief and I acknowledge that you are standing in yours, that opens breathing room in between the two. And so this was my aha. I start pivoting around. I start doing some coaching work. Turns out people don't go to a dog trainer for leadership coaching. Imagine that. They go to, they're like, so I would say, oh, and here's what the training package looks like. And they say, well, what is it? Well, you and I talked about how your behavior needs to change. That's not going to happen by me saying, take this pill, paint this thing, say this word. Like, it doesn't work like that. You're 50 years old, 60 years old, 40 years old. You've had a lifetime of these behaviors. They're not going to change overnight. So we got to practice, and practice takes time. It turns out that what happens is they kind of double down on like, well, I have therapy, or I've got an executive coach, or I'm doing that work over here. Fix my dog. And so I thought, okay, let me figure out what a different aspect of this is. And the next thing I know, I start getting inquiries from the Las Vegas Philharmonic, and I start working with that organization. I was a big fan when I was living in Las Vegas, big fan of the Philharmonic there, always been a symphony orchestra fan. And I started thinking about metaphors that made sense to the people that I was working with. All of a sudden, orchestration. Okay. So you've got your individual musician. So they've got to come with their own sense of self and practice and excellence and all that. But then they've got to blend with all these people. And there's a principal at the head of the section. And so that person, they've got a leader there, but then they move around sometimes. And then this section and this section, well, they've got to work together. And there's the principals of all of the sections, and they've got to work together. And then there's the music director, and then there's the concert master. That's a really useful metaphor for the orchestration of group communication.
Yeah.
So I started kind of chewing on that and integrating that with my work. And as you've mentioned, in my world, there are sports. And then there's ice hockey. I have been a fan of ice hockey since I think my father started carrying me to the games. The Flyers had just passed the first expansion beyond the original 6. One of the expansion teams was the Philadelphia Flyers. I was born the spring of their first year, their inaugural year. My family had season tickets already. So I was, essentially like a sack of potatoes on my dad's leg. He carried me. And this is in the days when they didn't really have the glass didn't go up real far above the boards. There was no net in the end, in the end zone. Players didn't wear helmets. I mean, it was essentially a gladiator sport played on steak knives with sticks in their hands. And, the fights would spill into the stands and the fans would get involved, and it was Philly. So it was messy. But I loved it. And I would go with my dad to all of the games all growing up. And we won 2 Stanley Cups. They haven't won any since, by the way. And then I didn't really follow the sport much until the Golden Knights arrived in Las Vegas in 2017. And for those who aren't really familiar with the story of the Vegas Golden Knights, I mean, Las Vegas, Nevada, the middle of the desert, 120 degrees, not the first place you think of when you think of ice hockey, a town where everyone is from somewhere else, super transient. They thought they'll never find a fan base. The fans will all be people who are fans of other teams. And the owner of the team, Bill Foley, said, no, this is the right place and the right time. And right before the home opener of the inaugural season was the October 1 shooting in Las Vegas at the Highway 91 Country Music Festival. And what we all witnessed in the city of Las Vegas, what the world got to see, was what leadership looks like. When a group of misfits who were rejected from their teams, who are thrown together in the least likely place in the world for a hockey team to ever be possible. And then they started to win. Mm-hmm. And they didn't just win. They went to the Stanley Cup final in their inaugural year, which has never been done in the history of the NHL, over 100 years. And the leadership of these young men and the way they leaned into the community, the way the team leaned into this tragedy and embraced the city, and the city embraced them right back. They healed our city in a way that I don't know that I've ever seen in a city with tragedy before. And I've lived in cities with different kinds of tragedies over my lifetime. And I started watching how they play. And, you know, they had a coach, then they had a different coach. And last season, Bruce Cassidy, who he was at Boston, he's a Canadian, great guy, came to the team. And there was a tangible shift in the team and how they played. The way the different lines were moved around. You know, there was no like the first line, second line, third line, fourth line, like the lines got moved around. So yes, there was the standard grouping, but he mixed the lines up a lot. He moved people around. He took a lot of chances. And he deepened and broadened the bench in a way that you don't really see in hockey these days. Typically, or it's Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. It's Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks. It's like there's this superstar player or two, and then the cast of characters. And in Vegas, literally in our playoff run last year, almost every player had a point. Like almost everybody touched the puck. And that's how deep, and it really goes all the way down the bench. And it doesn't matter, defense, offense, doesn't matter. And our goalie hasn't scored yet. That was done in Boston last year, but I don't put it past them. But the point being, watching his mastery of leadership, especially during the playoffs, especially as the leadership of the other teams was crumbling in every round, and watching these coaches screaming at their players and seeing footage of them screaming at their players in the dressing room and thinking to myself, I don't know what result you think you're going to get, but I don't think it's the result that you want to get. And I got the opportunity to talk to Bruce Cassidy a couple of weeks ago. I got to meet him because I got to go to the White House. Okay, I have to say it. The Vegas Golden Knights were recognized at the White House, and I got an invitation. So I got to go to the White House, and I got to touch the Stanley Cup and meet almost the whole team and talk to the whole broadcast team and the coaching staff. It was amazing. And I talked with Bruce for about 15, almost 20 minutes. And I looked for, basically, they're all the players. I'm like, yeah. Where's Bruce? Yeah. Like literally, I had the president of the team looking for him for me. I'm like, George, can you find Bruce for me? And I talked with him and I said, I have to tell you that you show me what it means to have emotion and shift right back into grace when shit's gone sideways. Like bad call, player injured, other team playing dirty, fans in Dallas throwing shit from the stands onto the ice that they had to end a period 45 seconds early to clean the ice, dumping popcorn on. I mean, you name it, and it was thrown at them. and just right back to center, right back to center. And so when I started thinking about how broken communication is in the world today, which is pretty bad, I can't fix what's happening in Israel and Gaza. I can't fix the Ukraine. Or can I? Because how can I possibly expect reasonable communication, respectful, candid communication, openness, and respect on that side of the world if I'm not doing it where I am? And I'm talking about being short with a barista at a coffee shop because you're having a bad morning and your order was wrong. And we've all done it. We've all done it. Nobody's proud of it, but we've all done it, some more than others. And when I'm not responsible with my feelings and I have my feelings on other people, I'm contributing to the context of the problems that I then turn around and point and say it's someone else's fault. And I don't have to drop a bomb or shoot a gun to be a causal agent in a problem. And so I started really thinking, one of my superpowers around communication, there are several. One of them is an incredible level of comfort walking into a really uncomfortable conversation and saying the thing that nobody else wants to say. Just ripping the Band-Aid off. I'm really comfortable doing it. I have worked very carefully on getting comfortable enough with really not caring how, like, I'm legitimately unattached if someone doesn't like what I say. It wasn't always the case. I used to say that, but not really mean it, which created a whole different thing. But to be able to say from a place of love, from a place of compassion, this is effed up. What you just said isn't okay. Can we talk about what created your thinking that was an okay thing to say? Because it's not an okay thing to say. And clearly you felt it was. So what's another way you could say that? Or what's really driving what you just said? You know, but when I come to it from a place of like, look, you're pissed. I get it. And unless I know what it is that's making you upset, I can't help. And I want to help. And to be able to be in that place and the leadership of the world today, world leaders, government leaders, there is this echoing void of leadership in the places right now where it could be most useful. Because to speak like this is to not play to the fringes and to not get the clicks and to not get like all of that. And so they're playing to these extremes. And so to be moderate in the world anymore means nobody pays attention, which is a really sad statement. So again, how do I do that in my family? How do I do that? Whether it's my own family, my family of origin, my family of choice, my work, business colleagues, projects that I volunteer with, my neighborhood, my, a religious or spiritual group I belong to, my gym, my city, county, state, commonwealth, nation, whatever level it might be. What does it look like to be rigorously honest? And I can't say that I do it all the time. I am not perfect. And every misstep I make is a good lesson for me. And I often use my own missteps as my lessons with my clients. Like, so I did this, let this be a cautionary tale for you, and I think that's important. I think there's a lot of talk, not just with coaches, but with people who are leaders in an industry who are trying to look good and make like they don't make mistakes and make like they've got intimacy down. And they talk about intimacy and vulnerability when they don't. Right. They talk about radical honesty when they're silent in a group where a conversation is being had and their voice isn't heard. And it's not right or wrong, good or bad. Like, you're not a bad person. If you're hearing this right now and you're like hanging your head and you're starting to feel bad, please, like, no, don't. This isn't a shame game. Just, we get to look at it honestly and just say, oh, okay, so I did that. That wasn't okay. So what am I going to change? To really detach from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so by building this program around these 3 pillars, whether it's a 3-month program, I'm building a program right now with the Richmond Symphony that we are doing together. That's going to be, all 3 pillars will be focused on symphonic music. So individual musician, group, and orchestra. And what do you do when you don't get along and all that? So we're working together to create that, as something to support the symphony, because I believe in supporting symphony orchestras. So I've got and then the 6-month program that I do year-long programs with clients where we break it into, even bigger chunks, because you could spend an entire year on any one of those elements, and still have more to cover. There's no bottom, that's the beautiful thing, because we are ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to come back around to your very first question, which I think also, in light of the season we are in right now, is that if you're going home for the holidays or you're spending time with family over the holiday season, you're going to have your buttons pushed, because you're going to the people who installed the buttons in the first place. They know where they are. They know how to push them. They will push, push, poke, poke, push, push, poke, poke. So what I get to do is, before I see them, I get to disconnect the buttons before I go. Because then they push the button, and it's like the little kid driving with the play school dashboard. They can be turning that wheel all they want to, not going to move the car, right? And so how do I decouple from it? And that, depending on what's going on with someone's family. I mean, I have a family member that I haven't spoken to in nearly a year, because the things that transpired were so catastrophic. I want to make sure that I am ready, because I already know what's coming at me from the other side. I get to go in there with 100% responsibility and see what I can create and make possible. And I've actually committed to doing that before the end of January. So, and I have spent most of the last year in incredibly intensive, deep work around this specific issue. Not the person is irrelevant, but what does this person represent? What do they bring up? And where else in my life does it show up besides everywhere? Client groups. I've had clients show up who all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, there it is. I've had it with employers. I haven't had it so much lately with people I date, but that used to be the pattern. Like, I used to be like, whoa, how did I get into this abusive relationship? So where do you begin? You can only begin with yourself. And the master stroke is when I can spend time in relationship with people who once would have triggered me, who once would have really devastated me, and I can be unattached. Doesn't mean I don't have feelings, but the feelings don't give rise to me saying the stupid thing or doing the stupid thing or acting. My go-to is acting like a petulant child. I'm really good at it. Like the sulky, sullen. I mean, it really is. When I look at it, I can't even really do it anymore, because it's so monumentally uncomfortable when I do. I'm like, oh God, no, I can't. No. And that's really the good news, that with the continued work on polishing communication, old patterns of communication that worked, air quotation marks, which is dubious at best, right? They didn't really work. They just kind of happened. But all of a sudden they feel really uncomfortable. And the thought of even doing them is uncomfortable. And so where do you begin? If you haven't done a sufficient level of personal work, and you have a family where, especially if there is some level of trauma involved, thinking that you can just suck it up and make do with, a year of therapy and go handle it and be anything other than not okay at the end of it is probably not a great idea. I'm not a therapist, but, that's just me speaking as a relatively unbiased observer. It is hard when the people that you're interacting with, when they, if they're in the work also, obviously it's easier because you have if everyone's doing some level of personal work, you have some level of common conversation.
Yeah.
But, you had asked me some questions, prior to our getting on today. And I think about my own situation. So I have a very kind of high energy promoting personality, and my controlling personality is literally tucked right up behind it. Right, and where she reveals herself is, especially if I'm uncomfortable or things aren't going the way that I had them planned,
mm-hmm.
she'll whip out a machete real fast and start cutting people's heads off. And so when I think about when personality clashes happen, especially in if you have a controlling parent, for example, if there's a controlling parent energy and you have maybe a spouse, or even you have some of that energy and you come up against it, I have two words that are, if you take away nothing from this conversation today and you take away these two words only as the best solution, here it is. Grab a pencil. You ready? Walk away. Maybe for 5 minutes. Go to the bathroom, go outside, step into another room, but close the pie hole or stuff pie in the pie hole, but don't let words fall out of the pie hole. Just stop. Pause. And if it's one of those insistent, like somebody who really needs to be right about something and they're just like going at you, just say, hey, you know what? I want to finish this conversation with you. Be right back. You don't have to explain where you're going. You don't have to justify leaving the room. Just do. And taking that moment, feeling the feeling of, oh my God, I'm 5 years old again and I don't matter and my voice doesn't matter and I'd have no control over it. Like all of that and the variations of that come up. Let them come, let them wash. I'm a big fan of what I call bookending family gatherings, where I'll have a trusted friend or a colleague that I'll call before and I'll call when I leave. Right? Or if I'm going anywhere that I know is going to be uncomfortable, I'll bookend it either with a text so that if they don't get a text or a call by a certain time, I get a phone call. And I can always say, like, maybe things are going great. Like, let's not catastrophize and manifest things going bad with family. It's just to be prepared and to not get caught off guard. That's what happened to me in January. I had been doing all this work and I got complacent. And in my complacency, I missed all of these signs. I missed all of these clues that the train was diverging to a different track. And I thought, because I've done so much work and I'm a communications professional and I do this for a living and I can totally handle this. And when a moment of friction transpired and I turned into a petulant, sullen child for like 36 hours. And then I rolled I was brushing my teeth, looked at myself in the mirror and just stopped brushing my teeth and kind of collapsed a little. I was like, oh, sweet Jesus. And so I engaged in a conversation that started with, so I get to acknowledge that my behavior over the last couple of days has been stupid. By owning the stupid, I get it. It was a not reasonable and unacceptable response to me being uncomfortable. It was not the appropriate way to express that I was uncomfortable. And I didn't even get that full sentence out because what happened was this individual started screaming at me. And when I say screaming, Alex, I mean like purple face, angry screaming and saying awful things. You know that voice in your head that tells you all of the terrible things?
Yeah.
It was that, except it was coming at me from a person. So I had this very strange out of body experience of, is the voice in my head even mine? And so that was actually quite liberating. I thought, wow, that's amazing. The voice in my head isn't mine. Got it. So the next time that thing chirps up, I can tell it, you're in the wrong brain. Leave me alone. I'm not going to listen to you. And then I had this overwhelming moment of calm. And what I didn't do next, we got back to another family member's house. And what I chose to do in that moment was to take the car keys and to go. I said, hey, everybody, I'm just going to go run some errands. I'll be back in a few. And I went and pulled into a parking lot and burst into tears and called a friend. I'm like, and I ugly cried. And by the time I got back, this couple had left. And what I would do differently now is instead of leaving the house, I would walk right into that was the moment to address it. And it's sometimes not a great idea to address things when adrenaline is high, when emotion. High,
yeah.
Right. And so what I would have done was something like, okay, so what just happened isn't okay. And I need 5 minutes to cool down. I'd like to suggest we do that. And then we get to sit down in the living room and talk about what just happened. Because it gets to stop now. It gets to stop here. And I don't know what would have happened because that's not what I did. I like to think it would have gone well. And so now I have some cleanup to do and I get to do it. I get to be responsible. It'll be received or it won't. I don't get to determine. I don't get to judge. Right. That's the other thing. We are so quick, especially if we've done some personal work. We look at our family members. They're like, they're not doing the work. I'm on my spiritual and emotional and intellectual high horse. Yeah. Which, of course, is really not what the work is all about. So, for me, we're going to mess up. It's going to be messy. It's going to be uncomfortable. And that gets to be okay. We live in a world where I don't know, I'm uncomfortable, I'm scared, that hurt my feelings. Can you say that to me in a different way? Has been taken to such an extreme as to actually negate it. Yeah. This idea of a safe space conversation. Yes, people should absolutely feel safe, meaning they should feel that they're able to say something without repercussion, without being hurt, that they're in a physically safe space, 100%. But I've got some clients that I've been working with who are actually combating right now therapeutic practices that have gone so beyond the pale of what a safe space is that no one's allowed to talk. That everybody has been so coddled and so overly emotionalized and overindulged that it's like, how do you go have your feelings in a healthy way? That's one set of work.
Yeah.
And then communicating them is a completely different set of work. Right? It's two different things. And Mr. Rogers taught us all the things to do decades ago. Fred Rogers was a genius. What do you do with the mad that you have when you're so mad inside you could spit? You pound clay, you pound on the keys of a keyboard of a piano, you run really fast, you swim really fast, you scream into a pillow. Have your feelings. Mad is okay. Sad is okay. Scared is okay. It's all okay. It's not the feeling that's the problem. It's the hanging on to it and chewing on it for 30 years. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And then make people in the world are so angry today about things that they don't even know what they're angry about anymore.
Well, just the repression of the feeling and everything, right? So, yeah.
All of it. It's ridiculous. And so, I love that you mentioned my GIF because to me, it's it's a clip that was taken of me at a Vegas Golden Knights game in, I think it was the spring of 2018. Might have been the fall of 2019. The spring of 2018 feels right. And I was on the Jumbotron a lot, and I would get caught on the national news feeds and a lot. And no matter what arena I go to, actually, it happened in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago. And a friend of mine posted at the beginning of the 2019 season, respond to this post with a GIF that expresses how you feel about hockey season starting. And someone I didn't know responded with this GIF of me that's an official GIF of the NHL from playoff season. Like, you see the NBC logo, you see the NHL logo. It's like, it's an official thing. And it's been downloaded, I think, close to 41 million times.
Wow.
And what it represents to me is unapologetic joy. And just being in the moment, really in the moment. Dance like nobody's watching. And even if they are watching, who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. Talking to the person next to you in the grocery line. I had a conversation. I was in the aisle at Trader Joe's, and I'm a terrible impulse buy shopper. Like, I'm the person they make the end caps for. I'm like, I go in with a list. If I diverge from the list, I end up with like $100 worth of things that I eventually need and use, but that I didn't need that day. And I'm in the aisle at Trader Joe's where they have all of the like lotions and body products and home goods and stuff. And there's like a freezer case on the other side. And I was looking at something, and there was a older woman standing there, and she's a mask on. And I said something about having a list and sticking to it and impulse buys. And then I said, like, Kath, and I have my hand on like gingerbread ice cream. I don't need gingerbread ice cream. Like, I don't need ice cream. I don't really even eat ice cream, but somehow gingerbread ice cream seemed like I just had to have it. And I started to put my hand on it, and I was like, no, Cathy, stick with your list. Cathy, stick with your list. And then a couple of minutes later, I'm a little farther down the aisle, and I pause and I put my hand on something and from like next to me, this woman said, Cathy, stick to your list. Stick to your list. You are on your way to the checkout stand. Stick to your list. It's delightful. I don't even know her name, but it was this, we have these moments, these light ties in our lives that can be filled with such joy and curiosity. And then I can take that into my life with my family.
Yeah.
And my friends. And like, there would be people who judge her because she's wearing a mask. I don't care. It's her choice. She gets to wear it if she wants to. Maybe she's sick and not trying to get anybody else sick. I actually think that's a pretty nice thing to do. I've done it myself, and seeing people. There was a guy at a gas station once. I was on a road trip. This guy's walking across by the pumps, and he's wearing a very familiar bright red baseball hat, which we here in America have grown to know exactly what it is. Make America great again. Right? And this isn't a political statement. It represents something, everything that it has a meaning. And he's walking toward me, older gentleman, and he looks at me and our eyes meet. And I smiled at him. And he smiled back. I said, how are you doing today, sir? He said, I'm doing very well, thank you. I said, where are you off to? And he told me, and said, by the way, you wouldn't know how to get back on I-95 from here, would you? I said, well, I'm actually traveling through myself, so I don't, but bet you my phone knows. And I pulled my phone out, which was open to my map and my GPS. And I helped him find his way. He was going on 95, the opposite direction for me. And I helped him find his way. And as I walked away, I thought to myself, he might be somebody's grandfather, somebody's dad. I'd like to think that if my mother, my nearly 91-year-old mother, were in a gas station and needed directions, that somebody who was diametrically opposed to her politically, ethically, religious, whatever, that somebody would support her because they would see their own mother.
Yeah.
And that's the world we get to live in. And communication is at the heart of all of it. And so from a functional perspective, I mean, yes, will you do better in business? Sure, you will, because your business relationships won't be transactional. The transactions will happen because they're connected. Will your family relationships be better? Sure, they will. Make more money, have more sex, have better friends. Like, yeah, it's all of that's true. And we also get to have a world that maybe isn't going to blow up tomorrow, which I don't know about you. I mean, I don't have kids, but I know that you do. And, what kind of world are we going to leave them?
Yeah. And I think this is why I was so, both Carol and I, right, we're so passionate about having you here because, I mean, we look at the world right now and then we get together with families and, you mentioned earlier about some internal triggers and things like that. And it's interesting because Carol and I both did a podcast leading up to your podcast and dove into even some of the things that you said today. So I love that there's like, you just reinforce some of the things that we talked about, right? And being more into the neuroscience behind this. And there are a few things that came to me as you were speaking. So one thing is vision. Like as you were talking even about, the Vegas nights and the coach, I mean, he had a vision for the team and to be able to come together and just, and as you, like standing in the vision of what you're creating and all the things are going to come at you and it's going to test you, right? We know that even with the neuroscience, when you're creating something that hasn't been done before, as you said, right? What the Vegas Knights were doing hadn't been done before in 100 years of NHL. He had a vision. And so when we're standing in our vision, we're going to go up against, obstacles, challenges, things that are going to test us. But he was so committed to the vision. And this is what we see in leaders and leadership and even with families. You're leaning into being committed to having connected conversations, the love, the joy with your teams, those that you have around you, leaning into that vision, the intention, leaning into being uncomfortable and stepping into of what it is that you want to create. And that's what I'm hearing a lot what you're saying, Cathy. Another thing there is really look internally too. I mean, one of the beliefs that I had in my stories was, my communication doesn't land. Like people don't hear me. Well, as we know with neuroscience, so that was my thought that communication doesn't land and people don't hear me. Well, then from that, my decisions and my results are going to just reinforce that. And that was something else that you mentioned too about deciding in advance, right? Like setting yourself up for success as you go into wherever you're going into, whether it's a meeting with your team, a meeting with your boss, not a meeting with your family, but gathering with your family, gathering with your friends, like your beingness and how you show up, the energy, right? People perceive that. And there's just something I wanted to lean into as well. Something that actually was one of our mentors, Judith, shared this with me about, we might say something and just because it doesn't land, it doesn't mean that we're wrong necessarily. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, right? Like a lot of times in leadership, like we have a feeling or we stand for something and it's okay that not everybody's in agreement. I think that was what I took from that, is that it's okay that everybody's not in agreement, right? If you have your vision, you know what's important to you, and that's okay. Because I think you're also leaning into a lot of people become complacent. I've been guilty of that, right? Like saying things that I feel that somebody else wants me to hear, right? Because of our need to wanting to be loved and liked and accepted, right?
Well, I want to clarify though. Like what I'm saying is, there's a difference between landing your message, and someone agreeing or aligning with your message,
right? Yeah,
right. We should always strive. And I don't like saying land a message, because what else do I land? I land a punch. I'm not looking to punch someone in the face with my communication.
Yeah,
I'm looking to connect with them, to convey a message, to have them hear the message with the intent that I am delivering it.
Right.
This is what we should strive to have at all times in our communication.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee when I do that someone will agree with me.
Right.
That will like me, that someone will align with me, that they will choose, they will do none of that is guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And I should still be working toward that connection.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things, the difference between having a stand and taking a position. That when I have a stand, it is by definition an open and internalized, vision-driven thing. It is what I believe.
Yeah.
It is who I am. It is where it is my come from. And it is open. It is expansive. It is inclusive.
Yeah.
I take a position on something. By definition, there will be something, someone, or someplace in opposition.
Yeah.
Which will create positionality, creates conflict.
Yeah.
This or that.
Yeah.
I did this because they did this. This is what we are seeing in the Middle East right now. And that is wrapped up with millennia of dysfunctional family anger.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back. Shall we go all the way back to see where this began? Okay, boys and girls, let's go back to Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. Let's go all the way back. When your wife says, it's okay, honey, you can go have sex with that person. And if you have a kid, if she has a kid, I don't care. What woman in her right mind is ever going to actually mean that besides none? But women weren't treated that way. And by the way, Hagar was a slave. Let's not forget that. She didn't have a voice in this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so let's talk about where that began. Is it justifiable? Of course it's upsetting. It's 5,000 years ago. It's like me saying that Mr. Lantieri, my 6th grade teacher, was mean to me.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I hate math.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's a simplistic. I'm not equating Mr. Lantieri to the Middle East crisis, but the point being that everyone is right in the situation over there. What's happening in Gaza is nothing short of a humanitarian crisis. It isn't genocide. Genocide is the eradication of a group of people. Not only is that not the case, but the population has grown. And has Israel handled themselves well? No, the Israeli government is awful. Awful, 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 awful. Is that the Israeli people? No. Do people deserve to be dragged from their homes and have awful things? No. Do people deserve to have bombs dropped on their houses and their schools? No. None of it is okay.
No.
And I can't justify and say peace for them, but not for them. And this is okay because of what's happening over here. Like the absurdity to justify that somehow what happened on October 7th is justified because of anything.
Mm-hmm.
That anyone would believe that comes from a place of positionality. So I got to ask, why do they believe that? What is underneath their belief of that?
Yeah.
Where do they come from?
So for the audience who's listening today, right? I mean, we have a lot of leaders and looking at creating that positive ripple effect of communication. What would you want to leave the listener with? Right? Like, I mean, they're in a position, they have influence. What is the last thing, right? Because you've shared so much here today, Cathy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to listen to like unpack all this. What is, knowing that you're so passionate about this and your mission for the leader who's listening to, what comes to me is being confident in the communication, be committed to the stand versus the position to create that opposition, to step into the authenticity, creating a safe space for teams to feel, to have that pause where they're not, I guess, feeling like they're coming up with confrontation, right? Like activating the brain where we're getting the reactive and like, just what would you, I guess, what is the final thing you want to share with the listener for them to really, so for them to embody it as they, walk in and greet their family members, to even set the intention of how it could go, right? Because if they're showing up as a leader in their beingness could completely shift those around them as well for that. And then
100%.
starting at home, and then in our, we talk about source, right? And in our work of leadership, to be a source to create this positive ripple effect and positive communication out in the world.
So I've got a couple nuggets. And these are not in any particular order. The first thing I'd say is a repetition of what I said before. When in doubt, stop talking.
Mm.
The way to get yourself out of the hole is to put down the shovel.
Mm. Yeah.
Continuing to dig is never the solution. So stop talking. And if you can stop before you start, even better. You feel the veins starting to throb. You feel your stomach start to twist. This is not the time for the mouth to open. And it usually does.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the first thing is to stop. The second is to step away if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Step away, cool down, take another run at it. That might mean the next day. Might mean 5 minutes. Might mean a half hour. It's going to depend. But step away and give yourself, and don't step away and then go call someone to talk about how awful the person is.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not going to serve either. Step away and do something that makes you feel good.
Mm.
If standing outside and smelling all of the fall, winter smells and the burning, like the fireplaces burning and the crunching of leaves is going to get you right, go do that for 10 minutes. If going into the bathroom and turning the water on and having a little ugly cry for a few minutes is going to do it, do that. If going into a guest bedroom and screaming into a pillow is going to do it, do that. If petting a dog is going to help, if calling a friend, but be careful you're not, again, sitting in looking for someone to co-sign your bullshit so you can justify doing a thing.
Yeah.
The third thing I'd say is just because we can do a thing doesn't mean we should do a thing.
Mm.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. We see that in social media all the time. All the time. Just because I can post doesn't mean I should post. Just because I can comment doesn't mean I should. You know, less is more.
Mm.
You know, the biggest thing that I've learned, especially with nonverbal communication and just kind of energetic reading and just being present with people, is language for all of the things that we say that it does for us and what we are because of our mastery of it is superfluous a lot of the time.
Mm.
You can remove it from an engagement and still have something meaningful. I sat for an hour with one of my uncles. He has since passed, but the last time I saw him, I was with him in the facility where was living at the time, and he was mostly nonverbal. They said he wasn't going to recognize me when I got there. He knew me the minute I came in and said Cathy. He said some words to me. He asked for my mom and my brother and a few other things. But we sat for an hour and I just told him stories. And he didn't speak to me. And he understood everything. And he spoke without speaking.
Mm.
I was with him for almost an hour, just about an hour, and it felt like 15 minutes.
Mm.
And that when we allow ourselves to get to like grounded, like what triggers me about my family, usually what I don't feel good about myself, you know? So, you know, get good with myself first, you know, and as far as work environments, I mean, look, there's all sorts of HR regulations and there's all sorts of other stuff that comes into play. But when you have an environment where the guidelines of how people are going to speak to each other is pretty clearly outlined and is modeled clearly from the people at the top, then you get what you get. So if an organization isn't communicating, it's because it hasn't been set up to. And if your organization isn't communicating and you want them to, give me a call. I'll be happy to help.
Well, that transition us into
shameless plug. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, so how can the audience connect with you? Where can they find you if they want to learn more, bring you in? Because you've done some phenomenal work, right? Like with so many different agencies
and small companies and I've worked with a lot of startups. I've worked with some bigger companies. I love working with arts organizations and nonprofits. I just love people. So it doesn't really, I didn't always love people. I used to only love dogs, but.
So I know we will have it in the show notes, but for those that are listening, what's the best
way to find me? So if you are on LinkedIn, you can find me easily on LinkedIn. It's, the usual linkedin.com with the / with the IN / and then just my name, Cathy Brooks. I'm actually almost embarrassingly easy to find on the internet. I strive for ubiquity. So I'm Cathy Brooks on Instagram. I'm Cathy Brooks on that thing that used to be called Twitter. I'm still there. I don't know why. I hardly ever post there, but I do check my messages. Unleashed Leadership LLC.com is the website. And Talk Unleashed is the podcast. And you can find it the same place you found this delicious podcast, as well as any platform that you enjoy. And I've got a cohort starting in January. I've got a couple seats left. Knock wood. By the time this broadcast, maybe I'll have to open a new cohort. Who knows? But yeah, I really enjoy that opportunity and would love to speak with any of y'all.
Well, thank you, Cathy, so much for being here. I mean, I got to say, there's definitely a lot here to unpack, and it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful.
Did we say we were going to talk for 20 minutes? I just looked at the time. Oops.
And it just goes back to what you said at the beginning. It starts with I, right? It really does start with yourself, right? So really getting connected and grounded with yourself and your communication, and look at where you can show up differently, ask different questions, be curious, and create that pause, create that space, feel the feels, and not have that contribute to how, things might go during communication. And really look at how you get to model, right? Model as a parent, model as a leader, model as a business owner, modeling even as you go out. I was thinking, Cathy, even as you said, something happens, you go to the coffee shop, right? Like, be the model, because it's so powerful when you get to show up and lead in all the different areas of your life. Speaking on the neuroscience, like the mirror neurons, right? Like, people will see that and they will mirror how you are showing up. And so really, we hear, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. And I really lean into that. Really be the change that you want to see. It's unbelievable the impact that you can create. And so it starts with the communication, nonverbal and verbal. And, just leave today really thinking about that. Think about how you can make a difference, make a change. And I think the last thing is really releasing judgment, letting go of the judgment, right? We're all human beings, and to be able to connect on a human being level, or if you're in Cathy's space working, with dogs and animals, like, we all have that heart, and just being able to connect heart to heart, versus maybe the triggers or whatever else that might be showing up for you. So Cathy, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to the listener. Happy holidays. And we will see you next week, listener. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Unleashed Unstoppable podcast with your hosts, Alexandra Carter and Carol Register.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review, and subscribe.
That's all for this episode, Wildly Ambitious Leaders. See you next week.